Hi there, this is the Common Magician, and this is not a tutorial at all. This is a discussion. It's a bit of a monologue here, and of course you can respond to this discussion in the comments below, and we can continue the discussion if you want to. But I'm going to call this segment quite simply Answers to Questions You Didn't Ask. Okay, so I'm going to answer questions that you never asked me, and you probably didn't care my thoughts on in the first place, but I'm going to answer them anyway. So, I'm going to talk about three things I think that are really, really big topics that I've seen come up time and time again in various internet forums on magic and even on the channel here, and comments that come up, criticisms that are made about various sorts of effects and performances across the board, and just give you some of my thoughts and feelings on these highly subjective issues that people treat, I think, way too objectively. So the first one is going to be a quick discussion on what's known as the too perfect theory. You may feel that you don't want to listen to any of this and you've already made up your mind on that, but hear me out. So we're going to talk about what's known as the too perfect theory. The second thing we're going to talk about is suspicion, the elimination of all suspicion. There are magicians who feel that a good effect and good presentation must eliminate all suspicion, and without doing that it can't be good. So we'll talk about that and what I think about that. And then the last thing is the concept of copyright in magical performances and effects and methods, and how does that work, and what is the morality of performing something or creating something or sharing something, or especially on this channel where we run into the issues, teaching something that may portray an effect that someone does, or may use a method that someone else uses, or may come close to something that has been in publication for sale and is on copyrighted media. So those are the three topics of discussion. So I hope you'll grab a cup of coffee or something and sit back and just kind of listen to me ramble here, and then maybe we can continue the discussion further in the comments. So the first issue is the too perfect theory. And I am a teacher. I'm a school teacher, which is one of the reasons why I don't put my face on YouTube very much. I try to keep my visual appearance limited because I do have a fairly public job, and I have a community that I serve and a student body, and I try not to be out there more than I need to be, but I think in this kind of format it's perfectly appropriate to be talking to you. But as a teacher, I believe in academic sourcing, and I believe that ideas that have been previously conveyed should be cited in discussions. But I'm going to throw all of that away right now, because this concept of the too perfect theory is not empirical. It's not empirical. It does not have the ability to be scientifically tested. It is a completely subjective philosophical position. So I'm going to say something very unacademic, and I'm going to say, I want you to forget everything you've ever read about this. I want you to forget all of the essays that you've seen published on this and all of the forums where you've seen this talked about, and just work with me through this from the very beginning of its definition and kind of logically sort this out. So, first of all, we have to define what this theory is in the first place. And I find that with a lot of these topics, by the way, just as a side note, I think what happens, as is the case with many arguments, people who generally agree on very basic things end up talking past each other because they fixate and focus in on one particular element that they feel they must prove, right, or demonstrate to be true and accurate. And I want to avoid that. I want to try to get us to at least notice that happens and kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So what is the too perfect theory? The idea there is that a performance can be so perfect that there is only one possible explanation at the end, right? And the audience is quick to recognize what that is. that all of the possibilities have been ruled out and there's only one way that it could have been done. It looks too good and too amazing, so that therefore the simplest, most logical explanation must be it. Even if it's the wrong one, right? The idea and the theory there is that a magical performance should never look that way, so that an audience member can just easily come to an answer. Some people believe that is true, that can actually happen. There are some people who don't believe that an effect can do that, right? That's even really possible. I am of the position that it does happen, that you can have an effect presentation which tips off either the method or gives the false assertion, certainty of a wrong method, right? And therefore, the presentation decreases in amazement. I don't know, the perfect example of this perhaps would be if you take an object in this hand and you place it in that hand, you close your hand, right? And then the object disappears or something, and it appears across the room, right? If it's just an object, I think, and we've actually been dealing with this lately, the idea of using a duplicate, I think that is too perfect to not rule out the concept of a duplicate. In fact, I think it's so perfect that it tips off the spectator to the likelihood of the answer, right? So how would you deal with that? There's one school of thought that says that you should do better to eliminate all suspicion, and that's the second topic we'll talk about in a minute. That there is too much suspicion that is there. You have not eliminated all suspicion. That your problem is not that it's too perfect, is that it is deeply flawed because you are giving up the answer, that you are making the actual method the suspicion, and you need to make the trick more perfect, and that's what you need to work at. The other side of it is that you, as the performer, should be creating more suspicion, that you should be throwing in red herrings, right? The false assertion that there's a method at play there that is different from what is actually in play. And if you can confuse the audience with multiple avenues of possibility, then you will fool them. Now, the problem with the second version of that is that I think if you create the situation where there's multiple possible answers, I think you decrease amazement, right? So let's just strike that off. I don't think that's a really good explanation for that. That really doesn't make sense. That if you create more possibility for a method, however improbable, I don't think that increases amazement. It might divert from the method, the true method, but really all you're doing is you're saying that this could have been done a number of different ways, right? So let's go to the other side there about eliminating all suspicion. I'm going to say I do not believe in that. I do not believe that there is such a thing as eliminating all suspicion. I think people who say that is what one should do, I think they are full of themselves. I'm just going to say that out loud, right? I think that's an arrogant position to come from. I don't think that magicians can do that. And again, that's the second topic we'll talk about in a minute here. Instead, I think what needs to happen is that we need to dissuade the spectator from the certainty of a method. I think that's the best you can do. I really do. I don't think you can eliminate methods. I think you can dissuade spectators from the certainty of methods, right? So in that same situation, I don't think you need to create more possibilities for alternative methods. I think you need to change the presentation so that the one method is doubted, right? The idea that there's a second coin. So if you were to do the same thing and it were signed, right, that decreases the possibility. But it doesn't eliminate it. You can never eliminate that suspicion. I don't think you can. I think you can help to deal with it. I think that's the best you can do, right? It doesn't eliminate the idea that someone helped you, right? There's always that possibility, which we'll talk about the stooge issue here in a minute. I think the goal in dealing with something that is too perfect, which I think can happen, is always going to be to do the best you can to decrease suspicion for any possibility. I think that's the best we can do. So, yeah, I do believe in the too perfect theory. I do believe that it can be dealt with. I do not believe that you can eliminate suspicion, which takes us to the second topic. Okay, suspicion cannot be eliminated. That's my position. Whenever someone says the problem with your trick is that you have not eliminated suspicion, or when someone says if someone is suspicious of the cards, right, the moment that someone says, let me look at those cards, your trick has failed, right? The moment that someone notices something awkward, your trick has failed, right? I don't believe that's true. I don't believe it. I'll tell you why. First of all, what we're talking about, I think, if in advocating that position, I think what you're talking about is the committing of the perfect crime, right? That's what you're talking about. Committing the perfect crime. The crime that cannot be solved, that the perpetrator cannot be caught. That's what you're saying. It's an arrogant presumption to make. If you think about the perfect crime in terms of the investigatory wing of law enforcement, right? They say that a perfect crime, like let's say a murder, the perfect murder, is committed by someone who has no record, no criminal record, who did not know the victim, and the victim did not know them. There was no pre-existing relationship. They did not leave any evidence, and they were not witnessed. There were no witnesses, right? And they did not talk about it to anybody else. They kept the thing entirely to themselves. That if you had all those things in play, then you would have the perfect crime. I hate to tell you, but a magician, just by stepping out on stage, loses out on all of those, right? There's an assumption that you're the trickster. From the suspicion is inherent. You can't eliminate it. You can't do that. It just isn't. You did something to accomplish what you did. You had to. Nobody believes, very few people will say, believes that what they're looking at is actually a miracle. They know it's a trick. They know it's a trick when they see it or when they experience it. They are left in amazement because they can't sort out how it was done. But they have suspicion inherently because they know that it's a trick, okay? But I won't stop there, okay? I think that there are some types of magic that inherently have awkwardness to them, right? The purest of coin magic that uses only sleight of hand is understood as the use of sleight of hand. You can't really get around that. The very best sleight of hand artist out there that works with coins, that is a purist and only uses sleights, you cannot look at all of their material and say that they never, the very best, and say that they never do anything awkward. You know, there is just the use of sleights are inherently awkward. You're going to see awkwardness or less than natural movements on the bulk of that material, even if you're absolutely the best at it. The goal is always to be as natural as possible. The goal is always to get something past the spectator. The goal is to try to achieve the eradication of suspicion, but you never can, right? You never can. Likewise, I would say that I don't think a trick has failed when the spectator asks for proof of something. On the contrary, when the spectator's asking for proof of something, they're chasing rabbits, right? They're trying to sort it out because they don't have it. They don't have it. That's not a bad sign. That's a good sign. That is not a sign of a failure of an effect. Now, it's the sign of a failure of an effect when a spectator calls something out and it is the thing. Then your effect has failed. But when they say, let me see those cards, and you say, here, right? Sure, go right ahead. And they're left with nothing. You buried them. You know, that's what you're going for. you're looking for, and I'll track back. That is the one way in which I think some of those people that talk about red herrings, I think that's one way in that they might be right. Because there is, I think, a sense in which you can tip off a false method on purpose to absolutely hide the right thing, right? That you can make something look like it is so that the spectator has a near impossible task to sort out the truth. I think that an effect is good if that is intentionally built in that way, right? That is kind of the one way in which you can create suspicion in an alternative place and not decrease amazement, but actually increase it. Right, so that plays into that first topic of the too perfect theory, that some of those people do have a point, right? And I think that when we fixate on the minutia of the argument, we start talking past each other and fail to recognize when someone has a point. But we'll say that. So, can suspicion be eliminated? No, it can't. It just isn't true, right? I can't tell you the number of times that I've watched since a very young boy watching television magic, and some of the very best television magicians. And when a spectator gets involved, it's just inevitable that someone in the room says, they were a plant. That person's a plant. They're in on it, right? It's just the first thing people go to. And it's not because there's something wrong with the presentation. It's because you can't eliminate suspicion, because they're lying, right? The magician is lying. They get in front of everybody and they lie. They lie like a rug. That's what we do. And everyone knows it. We're suspicious already. You can't get around it. So I think the best you can do is try to leave the spectator, again, with all of their questions answered as best you can so that they have nowhere to look. So, yeah. I'll also say this. Hector Chadwick did a really good short lecture on equivoque, which you can buy, actually. It's very inexpensive, just a few bucks. And he talks about equivoque, and one of the things he points out is that equivoque has a problem, and that the use of equivoque, and equivoque is a good method if you use it in the right way and layered properly. But equivoque has a problem where the longer they think about equivoque, or the act of using equivoque questions, the more a spectator will understand how it was accomplished. The goal is to try, in your presentation, is always to try to achieve the opposite. That the longer a spectator thinks about it, the more impossible it should seem. That is the goal. That's our goal. It's not the eradication of suspicion. It is merely the provision of answers, right? Providing the answers that a spectator needs to eliminate what suspicions they have. That's the goal. So then the last thing is copyright in magic. So this is a relatively unrelated topic to the too perfect theory or to the eradication of suspicion, but it's a really, really big topic that people will argue and fight over, and I'm going to give you my feelings on it here in a minute and try to explain myself. And it's really important for this channel because this is a teaching channel, right? So there are people that hate what we're doing here, right? They hate that. They think that there should be some kind of a paywall between magical secrets and effects, or magical methods, and the public, that things should be buried and found, that there should be a secret handshake, that only people should only be let in by gatekeepers, There are people that believe that. I think that's stupid. I think it's nonsense. I don't agree with it. I think stupid's a real word, by the way, and I think it has a real meaning. I think it's not well thought out. I think it lacks an explanation. Magic is a set of information. It's a menu of techniques. It is it's an encyclopedia of terms. That's like anything. It's something that can be learned. It can be learned, and it can be reproduced, and it can be passed down, and people can have it, and seek it and learn it and make it up, right? And reinvent it. More often than not, it's reinvented, which you'll get into copyright here in a minute. So, that's why I teach freely. I make my monies elsewhere, and I actually agree. I know I've seen a number of magicians that are in retirement and have been able to reflect on things that come to the conclusion that magic as an art form thrives best as a hobby. It really does. That magic in the experience of normal life from people that you know in ordinary settings is one of the best ways to experience magic, right? And that's a non-professional sort of arena. So, given that, I share freely, right, what I know with people that are like me. So, copyright. Is it okay to see an effect being marketed, not knowing the method, coming up with your own method, performing that, which might be the right method? You never know. Maybe you get it right? Might be the right method. And maybe even perhaps sharing it with someone else, right? So, is that immoral? Is it unethical? Any of those things. I think that there are some gray areas here, but I think that a lot of it is more black and white than we realize. And I'm going to try to at least address what is black and white, what is gray, at least as far as my thinking goes. So first of all, what is copyright in magic? What is it that a seller owns, someone who's created an effect? Here's what they own. They own the media that they create it in. So once it is affixed, once their concepts are affixed to matter and to media, they have a copyright. That's how copyright works. So once they have created their effect and they've put it onto a disc as a performance or to be taught, they have a copyright on that media, that performance and that record of it. Okay, that's what the copyright is. Violation of copyright would be to take that thing and to reproduce it in some way and then distribute it without permission. That is the violation of copyright. So as we look inside, now some of this could be related to the intellectual property. So what part of a magical effect sits in that realm of intellectual property that belongs to the creator? Is it the effect? Is it the method? Is it both? Is it both of them together? What is it, right? What is the intellectual property side of it? Here's my feeling on this. I don't think that an effect can be copyrighted unless it is very unique, right? I can't, it's so unique that I can't even come up with an example. I just can't. I suppose there must be a possibility there, but I can't think of one. But here's why I think that. If you take a pencil and you shove it through a bill, a dollar bill, and you pull it out and the bill is restored, a person that comes up with that doesn't own the pencil, they don't own the bill, right? They didn't make either one of those things. That is not part of it. They don't own them together. They can't trademark it in any way. They can't own it. They can't, sticking a pencil in a bill, they could own that pencil and that bill in that setting and sell that as a piece of art or something, right? They could have that. Those are possessions, things they can have. But the condition there, they certainly can't claim ownership to. You can't take the pencil out and seal the bill up, right, as if it's never been harmed, because a person can't own the concept of restoration. They can't own that miracle. It's not something that is intellectual property. Right? Even if it is done in a very particular setting and in a particular part of the dollar bill with a particular type of pencil, you can't own that. A person in general can't own an effect. I really don't think so. I don't think there's a way to say that, again, unless it's extremely unique, and it would have to be so unique that I can't even think of an example. I think there's a very small list of magical effects that are even possible, and nobody owns those things. They just don't, right? What we're talking about is doing one of those things on the list with stuff, with objects, right? If someone made, I suppose if I come up with something, if someone made a widget, right, that had a very specific appearance to it that is unlike anything that's ever been made, and they have another widget, widget A and widget B, and these are things that have a sort of, they're patented things, right, that belong to the person. And they take those two things and they make them do something. And it happens to be a magical something. I suppose there is a copyright thing there going on, right? But that's not typically how magic works. What I just described is not a good effect. It just isn't something people they'd say, well, I don't know what that is, I don't know what that is, and I don't know why what they're doing wouldn't be possible, because I don't know what they are. Very abstract thinking, but I don't think anybody owns an effect. People may disagree with me, but I challenge you on that point. I don't think you can really claim ownership to it. So then we get to the other issue, which is method. Well, the problem is that with method, I don't think anybody owns faking something. To say that I'm going to put a pencil through a dollar bill and rip it and then restore it, I'm going to fake that. I don't think anybody owns that either, necessarily. Now, I think there may be some apparatus or gimmicks that can be made that can have a copyright, that shouldn't be copied and should not be recreated, right? And I think you're kind of getting into patents more than anything, and I'm not sure that people seek patents on magical effects, but too much. Maybe for some bigger stage illusions that happens, I think, more than anything. But aside from gimmicks, like that, I don't think anyone can really own a lot of methods either. Especially when you're dealing with either gimmicks or methods that are over 100 years old and have been published before and have been used, right? You can piece methods that exist from one place together with an effect that exists from one concept over here and put those things together. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a copyright beyond the medium that you're selling, in terms of intellectual property. So, those are my thoughts on that. I think that the method side of it is a little bit more gray, but even then, I think someone has a hard time claiming a method using a method that pre-exists, right? Or something that is similar to something else. Someone using a thumb tip to accomplish a feat. The thumb tip's a pre-existing thing, and what the thumb tip is used for is pretty universal. There's a certain number of things that you can do with a thumb tip. I think maybe finding a new way to use a thumb tip, I think if someone publishes something like that and it comes up again, I think that permission ought to be sought to use that there needs to be some sort of crediting that needs to go on there, or royalty transactions maybe. I think you might be getting into the intellectual property side of it there when you're doing something brand new with a pre-existing prop. But anyway, again, it's gray. So it is illegal, I think, of course, I know, it is illegal to copy someone's media and to redistribute it and claim it as your own. That's plagiarism. That's bad. I think it's illegal to take all of the information that is on something and then post it online and share that. I think that is illegal. I think that is bad. I don't think that should be done. It should be avoided at all costs. Now, to the other side of it, I think that the idea of taking an effect that pre-exists and coming up with a new or your own method to do it and performing it or even sharing it, I don't think that's that gray. I think that's black and white. I think it's pretty okay. I think it's okay to do that. Now, let me explain here. So the idea of creating competing methods is as old as any discipline. Okay, it's as old as history. So you have a way to you have something that is accomplished and done. You have one person that has a way to do that and accomplish it, and someone comes up with another way to do it, right? And back and forth you go. This is like having the Victorian, magicians that had a theater on one side of the street and a theater up the street over. They made movies about this, right? It's a great plot. And one person does one trick over here and they have an effect, and then the person over here has another, does the exact same effect with their own method and their own presentation, and these groups are competing with each other. I think that is a black and white issue. I don't think there's anything immoral about it. I think it is the nature of the beast, and the goal is to have the best method and the best effect and the best presentation, and if that is you, then you will be successful, and if it's not you, then you're going to be lost in the shuffle. So, I think it's a great exercise, actually, to look at an effect that you really enjoy and find a way to do it. You might have to cut corners and do it differently, or you might find a better way, or you might find better proofs and make it, increase its value in some way. That's what the market does anyway, right? Someone comes up with an effect in the market and someone else comes up with another similar thing. It happens all the time. They don't ask permission to do that. And the fact that you're selling yours doesn't make you more right than a person that just does it on their own and maybe shares it with somebody. So, I think that is fine. I think that is fine to do. to emulate the effects that you see that are on the market and find ways to do them. In fact, it's a very good thing to do, and it gets you thinking, and it gets you processing your capabilities and your inventory of methods and tricks that you have up your sleeve. So anyway, those are my thoughts on all of this. Feel free to roast me, just so long as you know I roast back. I'm willing to converse with you. But anyway, those are my thoughts on some big controversial topics that you didn't ask for, but I'm telling you anyway. So with that, good luck and happy magicking.